All right. So this is lecture 10 of the online component of MCL 361, and this is basically we are going to finish up with simulation today. Okay. And what in the first two lectures of simulation, we essentially looked at we, dis- uh, we defined what a simulation is. We discussed different types of simulations. In lecture 2, I showed you an actual simulation that we had developed for an actual simulation that I had coded, for example, to show the operations of a clinic, maybe with a doctor and two types of patients, right? To illustrate how a discrete event simulation is sort of built and how it sort of executes events and so on. Uh, and then we ended that lecture with a description of we started with what are the different steps required in developing a simulation, right? Developing and sort of using a simulation. And the first step that we discussed there was actually really defining the scope of the simulation. Um so today we'll continue with that, right? So today we are going to actually finish off with uh, going through the various steps that are involved in working in developing a simulation of a system and using that simulation of a system, right? So analyze and potentially improve the system. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's and of course throughout I'm going to show you examples, right, of exactly what we're doing in the context of that simulation I showed you in the last lecture, and also in the context of actual simulation studies that my research group is working on here at IIT Delhi. Okay, so steps in developing a simulation. So the first step was, as we discussed, it was defining the scope of the simulation. Alternatively, it is, and that you get by essentially by studying the system, right? System under consideration. And what did we do here? We essentially we said we first have to go. We have to uh, observe the system. We have to talk to the stakeholders. So for example, if you're talking about a clinic, then we have to go and look at the clinic. We have to understand what are the different processes involved in the clinic, what are the different types of medical care, what are the different types of patients coming in, what are the different types of medical care, what are the different types of medical personnel, non-medical personnel, and all that. You have to talk to the stakeholders, maybe the person who manages the hospital, the different doctors. You have to figure out what the issues are. So where, in which subsystems of the simulation do you have the issues, and based on that you have to sort of figure out what is the exact part of this overall system that you are going to model, right? So what is going to be this system for your simulation? What are you going to include in your simulation, right? So, and one of the things we talked about, for example, is if your focus is on the provision of medical care, for example, in a hospital, then you're essentially only going to include all the components of the hospital that are involved in the provision of medical care, and you will not include all the other activities, right? So for example, if you're looking at medical care provided to outpatients, right? So then you're not going to take into account any emergency patients, you're not going to take into account inpatients. So you're only looking at outpatients. You have to define, okay, there's a general OPD, then there are some specialist OPDs. You have to study the rate at which patients come in to the general OPD, to the specialist OPDs. You have to characterize the service times, and then on the basis of that, you develop your simulation, right? So again, this is something that, for example, when you go and talk to the stakeholder, the hospital manager or the clinic manager, they will tell you, for example, okay, we are actually looking at understanding and improving our outpatient system a little better, right? So it depends upon what component of the system you are interested in modeling, and what component of the system you typically have an issue in. That said, it is also very possible that you may want to, so for example, the hospital manager is familiar with the use of simulations to improve hospitals and hospital operations and so on. In maybe sort of they've read the literature, maybe they've talked to other hospital managers and they have benefited from that, and they may say, okay, you know what, I want a general purpose simulation of the entire hospital with as much detail as possible. Uh, and I'm not focusing on one particular sort of aspect of the hospital, right? So I'm not, for example, focusing only on the OPD. I may also be focusing, for example, on the inpatients, on the childbirth care services, um, on the ICU, on the emergency, on the casualty, and so on, right? In such a situation, in such a situation, you actually want to study the entire system. You have to discuss with them as to what are the things that you can include in the simulation, right? Because it's not possible to include every single thing in the simulation. So you may, for example, broadly want to focus on medical care, and maybe some essential ancillary services you may want to include as part of that, right? Where medical care directly depends upon provision of those ancillary services. And that is something that you have to decide once again by having maybe one or multiple conversations with the stakeholders and figuring out exactly, okay, you may want to develop a general purpose simulation. Still, there are some things that are, that might be more important than the others. So you have to figure out what to include in the model. Okay. So this is not an easy step. It's not necessarily, I can't tell you that, okay, this is exactly how to go about it, but um, these are the overall steps that you want to follow. You first have to go observe the system, you have to talk to the stakeholders, and then you have to figure out what it is that you're going to include in your system, right? And in the second step, and we're going to look at the remaining steps today. In the second step, what you want to do is you want to develop a model of the system. So once in the first step you have decided, okay, this is the subsystem of the overall sort of facility or whatever it is that of the other process that you are going to model, that becomes your system that you are going to model in the simulation, right? So you have to develop a model of the system. So that's a conceptual model, or it could be mathematical, like, right? And conceptual or mathematical model of the system, and you have to identify the parameters associated with it. What are the parameters of interest? Now keep in mind, I'm not just saying input parameters here. This could include some output parameters as well, or in other words, outcomes of the model. I'll talk about why I'm not sort of saying that you know we I'm not saying that we should identify only the input parameters. Okay, I'll come to that a little later. But basically, we have to develop a model of the system and then identify the parameters of interest. So they sort of go hand in hand, and that's why I'm not separating this step from the I'm not separating these two steps. Okay. Now, what does this involve? So let's say, for example, you go to the hospital, and I'm going to continue with the sort of the healthcare example because I work in healthcare directly. I've done multiple healthcare simulations. So, but it's what we're talking about. Does not at all necessarily need to apply only to healthcare, right? So for example, one of the other projects that I'm working on is actually simulating with actually a couple of your seniors, is simulating the HPC system at IIT Delhi, actually the arrival of jobs, the scheduling of that, and so on. So as part of that, once again, we had to sort of talk to the stakeholders. We actually had to talk to the person who manages the HPC system, and based on their inputs, we actually had to we decided what was going to be included in the simulation, and then identify the parameters and so on, right? So the steps that I'm talking about do not apply only to healthcare, but I'm going to use healthcare as an throughout, simply because actually I have multiple examples that I can quickly pull up and show you, right? All right. Okay. So develop a model of the system. So let's say you go to the hospital, and the stakeholders tells you that there's one particular clinic that is of interest for us, and let's say that I'm just going to pull up the simulation. Hold on. Okay, so let's say that, for example, you're going to you go to the hospital, and they say there's one particular clinic that clinic has two types of patients. So you have to actually develop you have to go study that particular subsystem of that hospital and figure out what is happening there, right? So you have to develop a conceptualization, you have to develop a representation that you are actually going to go and simulate. What is the process that you are going to simulate uh, in your system? That is something that you have that you have to develop a representation of that. What does that mean, the representation? So typically, if you're talking about discrete event simulation, you usually develop some sort of a flow chart actually. So let me give you an example. Let's say, which captures what is happening in the process, the logic of the system that you're modeling. So in our case, if you recall, if you recall from the simulation that I showed, discrete event simulation that I showed you in Python last time, what you're developing is actually fairly straightforward. You're developing, there's a single, let's say there's a clinic and there's a doctor, there's a single doctor, okay, and there are two types of patients coming in. So you have inpatients and you have outpatients, right? Both of them join the same queue, okay, and uh, and the queuing discipline essentially is first come first served, right? So each of them have an arrival rate, and they arrive and they join the queue, they see the doctor. The doctor has different service rates for inpatients and outpatients, and then they leave after receiving service. So here this is actually fairly straightforward to develop a conceptual model. So you may want to develop a flowchart, like for example, patient arrives, this is maybe an event, for example. So patient arrives, is doctor available? So the first question is, yeah, so is the doctor available? Is doctor available? So if yes, uh, inpatient or outpatient is the next question, right? If inpatient, then uh, wait, let's actually this. So I'm just doing this sort of off the top of my head, so we might. Okay, 1 second. Okay. All right. So let's say the question is inpatient. If the inpatient, then basically set your service time equal to, so lambda is equal to, let's say, lambda IP. Sorry about the poor quality of the drawing. Let me see if I can improve it, right? So if yes, then your service time mu is basically mu IP, okay, and then after they finish the service, leave, right? And what happens here is, the doctor available? No. Once again, you just basically join queue, and this is something that uh, and you know and then basically you just move up the queue and so on. So this is not a perfect example of what would happen, and you can say that maybe after each patient leaves, you want to go back and check whether the doctor is available, and then the simulation logic basically just iterates through the patients in the queue, right? So that's not an issue. But this is a very rough example of what, for example, the conceptual model would look like, okay, for our um, the conceptual model would look like for the doctor patient, for the simulation that I showed you in Python, okay, where you have a single doctor and you have two types of patients. So this is an example of a flowchart, right? It's not necessary that the conceptual model always has to be in the form of a flowchart. It can be in the form of, for example, an algorithm also. So let me actually show you a good example of that. Let's see. Let me yeah. So let's see this, for example. Give me a moment while I open up the file. Yeah, so I think sorry, it's a little slow for some reason. Why it's taking so long? Give me a moment. If not, I'll just pull up the file directly. Yeah, okay, here we go. So this is a very recent paper of ours. One second. Yeah, I don't know why my computer is being so slow. Anyway, so here we actually represented. I really don't know why this is not maximizing. I have a feeling it's probably because it's in the tablet view mode. Hold on, let me just exit that. Yeah, now I think I can show you clearly. Yeah, so now, so here we actually represented the logic in the form of an algorithm. So you can see that here, right? So the conceptual model of the system of the patient flow, or what actually happens in the simulation, that is, for example, represented in the form of a algorithm. So right, so as an if else, as a series of if else statements, right? So that is one example. Anyway, so let's actually get back to our system here. So you have to develop a conceptual model of the system. Okay. Now, when you develop the conceptual model of the system, you will actually be able to also identify what are the key parameters that we have to include in the system, right? So what are the key parameters that we have to, for example, estimate? So let me give you an example in this case, right? So we have a single doctor and we have two types of patients. So we have two patient types. So you have inpatients and then you have outpatients. Now, let's think about what are the parameters that are required. So why don't you all just take a minute, think about it, come back. This would be a good point to pause the video if required. So the first question, uh, parameter is what is the rate at which at which patients arrive. What is the rate at which inpatients arrive? What is the rate at which outpatients arrive? Right. So the first question is, let's say the parameters is arrival rates of inpatients, outpatients. Okay, so let's write down what the parameters are. So of inpatients, outpatients. Now, let me, if I go back to, for example, the HPC example, in the HPC simulation example, we had to actually figure out what are the parameters, what are the arrival rates of jobs of different priorities, right? Computing jobs of different priorities. And also there are many other parameters. So for example, there are job characteristics also, which would define, for example, what would be the position that would be used to actually figure out how to allocate computers or nodes or cores within the high performance computing network at IIT uh, to the to the jobs, right? So another example would be we have actually also developed a simulation of the transplantation system, right? So the kidney transplantation system in this country, and what we do there is we there we have to simulate the arrival of patients and we have to simulate the arrival of organs. So both the patients, so you have an arrival rate for patients, you have an arrival rate also for organs, right? So for kidneys, donated kidneys. Uh, in this case, the kidneys have some characteristics, the donated kidneys have some characteristics, the patients also have some characteristics. For example, how much time have they spent on dialysis, what is their age, have they had previous transplants, all these things. So all these parameters actually we have to assign to each arriving patient. Okay, now and all of those parameters of the patient as well as of the organs, though they are actually used in determining, in figuring out which organ to give to which patient when it comes. Okay, so so these parameters are used in allocating organs to patients. Similarly, in the HPC context, the characteristics of the job as well as the characteristics of the HPC network itself, they are used in allocating nodes or cores within the nodes. A node in the HPC network is a given it's a given computer, and cores of course are within each node, right? So which set of cores and which set of nodes you have to allocate to a particular job. Okay, so all these parameters are required for in the logic of the simulation. So in our case we just have arrival rates, of course, one, and then once the patient actually comes and receives is ready to enter service, the question is how, what is the service rate also, right, or the process times, right? So service rate for inpatients and service rate for outpatients. Okay, so this is, and in our case we don't have any other parameters, but if you're building a more complex simulation, then your flowchart is going to be more complicated, or your algorithm is going to be more complicated, and the number of parameters that you have also are going to be much more. So let me give you another example, right? Let's see. So this is a paper that is currently under review by that I've written with one of my students, PhD students. So let me just show you. So we were actually simulating the operations of a primary health center. Um, yeah, so yeah, you can see this. This is the flowchart here, right? The conceptual model of the system. So patient arrives, they can either be inpatients, outpatients, antenatal care patients, childbirth patients. Then we have a fair number of decisions here. So the first question here is, what is the inpatient arrival rate, what is the outpatient arrival rate, what is the antenatal care patient arrival rate, what is the childbirth patient arrival rate. Then the question is, what proportion of them are above the age of 30. Then they see a nurse, so you have a service rate for the nurse, for the non-communicable disease nurse here. You have a service rate for the doctor here for each of these. You have a separate service rate for ANC patients. You have a separate service rate for childbirth patients, both by the nurse as well as the doctor. How long do they occupy the bed, the delivery bed? How long does an inpatient stay in the inpatient ward, and so on, right? So there's a pharmacy. So what is the service time at the pharmacy? All these things, right? There's a lab. What is the service time at the lab? So there are all these parameters, for example, and you can see them also here. So this is just some. You have one set of input parameters here. So you have a doctor consultation, pharmacy service time, laboratory service time, all of these, right? Similarly, I think we have more as well. Yeah, and we have a few. Hold on, actually. Yeah, so we have more as well, but I'm not going to show you that. But those are some key parameters there. Okay, now let's get back to our notes. Okay, now so you have to develop a conceptual model. You have to do the you have to identify the parameters. What is the third step? So the third step is estimation of the parameters. How do you estimate, for example, the arrival rate of the inpatient, the service rate of the inpatients and the outpatients and so on, right? Now, the way to do it is ideally you actually go observe the system, you actually calculate what the for example, if it's inpatients, either you go to the doctor, you go and you observe the system over the period of maybe a bunch of days, for example, and actually note down the number of patients and what time they're arriving in your, wherever, and then you actually fit a distribution to that data, uh, and that will help you actually parameterize the arrival rate of the inpatients, right? Of for example, of that particular job type or that particular patient type in this case. In the case of outpatients, for example, maybe you don't have to go every day. Maybe you don't have to go over a period of days, but maybe you go for 2 3 days, and what you do is you spend 2 hours in the morning, maybe from 10 to 12. Then the next day you go in the evening from maybe 3 to 5, and then maybe sometime in the afternoon from 11 to 1 or 11:30 to 1:30 or something of that sort. And then you observe how many patients are coming, not only how many patients are coming and what is the interarrival time. So you note down the time, exact time, using a stopwatch, for example, at the point at which a particular patient enters. Maybe you also note down the amount of time. At which the patient enters. So you say, for example, on this day 30 patients came in 1 hour, or maybe 50 patients came in 2 hours, and the interarrival time between each of these 30 patients and 50 patients is something that you have also noted down. Okay. So for example, you can note that down, for example, the arrival times as I1, I2, I3 up to maybe IN over a period of, for example, T hours. Okay, then if you want to calculate, for example, what is the average arrival rate, that per hour, for example, that is just going to be n divided by t. What is the average interarrival time? That is going to be, from this you're going to calculate maybe I2 minus I1, I3 minus maybe this is going to be I1 minus T naught, for example, I2 minus I1, I3 minus I2, and so on. So that is just going to be the summation of this. I'm going to call these maybe IA. Let's say each one of these is IAI, right? So the average interarrival time. So this will be your average arrival rate, which is number of patients per hour. Then you have an average arrival rate, interarrival time, which is going to be sigma I divided by n, right? So for example, okay, now, but is it enough to just calculate the average values? No, it's not. So what you should do is you should actually fit distributions to this data, for example. So if you collect it, for example, over a period of t hours, then you divide it into, for each t hour, for each of the t hours, you figure out what is the number of patients coming. So let's say, for example, for a period of 30 hours, you figured out that, okay, in the first hour maybe 10 patients come, second hour maybe 12 patients come, then it's 8, and so on. What you do is you actually fit a distribution to that data. I'm not going to go into how to fit the distribution in, but once you fit the distribution, you automatically get its mean, you get its standard deviation, and other things, and that distribution is what you're actually going to sample from, right? Now let me actually show you this in the context of the simulation. Okay, so let's come here. So yeah, so here for example the inter-arrival time for were these inpatients or outpatients? I think these were inpatients if I remember correctly. Yeah, these are inpatients. These are outpatients. Sorry. Uh, Now the interval time of outpatients. So we are seeing that outpatients come actually much more frequently. Here it's an exponential distribution, right? And they have with a mean of 3 minutes. Similarly, here for inpatients, uh, they also arrive according to the exponential distribution with a mean of 20 minutes, right? So that is so the idea is you have to estimate these parameters by visiting the facility and then observing the data, then collecting it and fitting a distribution rate. Now, will you always be able to visit the facility and collect data and fit a distribution? No, you will not. Okay. In which case, what you have to do is maybe you can actually rely on historical data that is actually maintained by the facility under consideration. For example, they may have it on day one, I1 number of patients came in, day two, I2 number of patients came in. So they may not maintain it hour by hour, but they might maintain day by day for maybe 30 days. And you may be able to fit a distribution to that and figure out what the interval time per day is, and that you can extrapolate to, for example, minutes or hours or whatever, right? So if, for example, 300 patients come in a day, and you know that 8 hours is the working hours, then the number of patients coming per hour is 25, is 300 divided by 8, right? So what is that? I think that's 37.5. And per hour is then just then the interval time in minutes is basically just going to be 60 divided by 37.5, right? Okay. Uh, in some cases, you may not even have that data, historical data. Then what you do is you maybe talk to the people there, okay, and get a sense of what is the, okay, on average, how much time, for example, you may not, maybe let's say they don't maintain service time data for inpatients, right? It could be for, they don't do that, but they have data for other things. So in which case you go and talk to the doctor, okay, on average, how long does a patient stay, right? In the ward, how long does a patient occupy the bed for, how much time does a doctor actually spend per patient, right? And the doctor might tell you, okay, it could be anything between 10 minutes and 20 minutes per patient per day, in which case you use that in your simulation. Maybe you can use a uniform distribution between 10 and 20 minutes, maybe a triangular distribution with um, parameterized by 10, 15, 20, for example, with 15 being the mode, right? Let me give you an example of where we have done that. Again, I'll come back to the same paper. Sorry, these are the results. So yeah, so here, for example, this is from the discussion with the doctor and the nurse with a triangular distribution. Here with there's a uniform distribution. So the nurse actually told us that yeah, it's anything between 2 hours to 4 hours for a childbirth patient. It's anything between 30 minutes to 60 minutes of service time, not the stay actually, for a for an inpatient, right? So we assume the uniform distribution here. So this is but here for consultation time, for pharmacy service time, we actually went there, we observed them, we collected data using a stopwatch and fit a distribution rate, right? So there's fit a normal distribution. So I can show you that. We even, I think, discuss that somewhere here. So yeah, 60 observations for the doctor, pharmacy and lab service duration recorded using a stopwatch during our PHC visits. We're estimating that. Goodness of fit tests, Anderson-Darling statistic with p-values and so on. Okay, all right. So this is a very important part of the process, actually, estimation of input parameters. And here you need to you also need to carefully document for which parameters you have data and which parameters you don't have data, and you're sort of estimating them based on discussions with for example, people, right? So there might be greater variability there. So you may want to document that, and that is, so they form part of the assumptions underlying your model, right? So it's very important to be aware of that, to document that, and later to actually also test those assumptions. So this is parameter estimation. Okay. One thing I want to mention as part of both, I think, step 2 and step 3 is we've talked about the input parameters, right? So let's go back to our doctor the doctor with two types of patient simulation. Now, if I go back here, so for example, let me come to, yeah, let's actually look at what it is that we are now. If you want to analyze the operations of this clinic, right, with a single doctor and two types of patients, what are the parameters? What are the output parameters? What are the outputs that you would be interested in, right? So that is one question. So if I were from the perspective of a patient, for example, I would want to know how much time on average do I want to wait? Not do I want to wait, but will I have to wait if I come to this clinic? Right, so that is one question. Uh, so the average waiting time is going to be of interest, just like when we saw in queuing systems, CTQ, right? The amount of time spent in the queue. So that is of interest. How much time in total do I spend at the clinic, right? Including waiting time and service time. That is something of interest to me. CT, right? That is your CT. That is something that I would be interested in. What is the utilization of the doctor? That is also something. If I was managing the clinic, I would want to keep my doctors reasonably utilized, but not maybe too crazy. Also, remember, getting close to utilization of one, very close to utilization of one is not necessarily good, right? So for that, let me. So that's what we are collecting here. So if you're looking at what are the things that I'm actually uh, what are the things that I'm actually um, collecting in the outputs here is wait time, of course, and also utilization, which I've commented out for now, but we can easily remove that, right? So if I move that here, all right, and let's say I run it for a period of 10,000. Okay, and now let's run it. So I'm not calculating the average waiting time, but you can see that I'm actually, I am documenting the waiting time here. It's something that I'm very interested in general, right? So this is the waiting time column. One second. So, and of course, I'm also interested in the utilization, which is what I'm capturing here. So there's a 43% utilization of the doctor. Okay. So you have to also define what are the output parameters or the outcomes that you're interested in. Okay. And when you go to collect data for the inputs, it's always a good idea to also collect some data on these output parameters, simply so that later, after you run your simulation, you can validate the output of your simulation by comparing these outcomes to the data. Okay, to the data that you have collected for these outcomes, actually, when you went and collected data for the system as a whole. Okay, all right. So one thing I'm going to mention here is important to collect data for both input parameters and outcomes, right? Outcomes or output, key outputs of interest or outcomes of interest. All right. Okay. So we talked about estimation of input parameters. All right. Next, once you have your conceptual model, you have your input parameters, then you go ahead and then you program the model. So there is not much to say here. You have to choose, for example, a simulation, programming environment, whether it is, let's say, platform. So, for example, I try not to use built-in simulation packages. So there are many discrete event simulation packages. There are many agent-based simulation map packages. There are many Monte Carlo simulation packages. Monte Carlo simulation, well, if you're building a mathematical model, typically, which you typically need to for Monte Carlo simulation, then you might have to code in a general purpose programming language or an environment, scientific computing environment. But for discrete event simulation, for agent-based simulation, for systems dynamic simulations, you typically have a lot of programming platforms that are out there, simulation platforms that are out there. Common simulation platforms, for example, are well, right now I would say AnyLogic. You have Arena. This was, I think, a little while back. I'm not sure how popular Arena is. There's something called as, I think, Flexsim. There's Via and so on. So I don't, as I said, my group, I typically discourage becoming, using particular simulations of platforms. So what we do is we usually work either on MATLAB or on Python. Mostly, I would say it's roughly an even split between MATLAB and Python. Although I prefer to go with Python simply because it's easier to integrate, for example, machine learning, the analysis of data, all of that a little bit more easily than MATLAB, I would say. MATLAB has its advantages though. It's generally a bit faster, especially for different kinds of simulations. But and I find the data structures are also a little easier to work with. But that's it. It doesn't obviously it also does not offer the amount of flexibility, for example, that full-featured programming language like Python does, right? So or for example, as I said, you can use Python, MATLAB. I've not used Julia, but I've heard Julia is also good. Okay. You can even build simulations in R also. I've done it myself actually, some Monte Carlo simulations. Uh, I think way back. But I think overall I definitely work with MATLAB and Python the most. Okay. In Python you have various actually simulation packages called as SymPy, Salabim, and so on. So I am familiar with SymPy. So you can see that actually I'm actually using SymPy here. Right, so import SymPy as sim, but the Salabim as well, and so on, right? So uh, I said many options. Program the model, then of course, like with any other program, you have to sort of you have to debug it. I'm not going to go into all of that, but yeah, basically program the model. Then what you have to do is validate your model. This is an important step, and this is actually not as straightforward as you would think it is, right? How do you know that your simulation is making sense? It is actually giving correct outputs, right? So that is an important question, and it's very important to figure out ways to validate your model. Okay, so as I said, the best way is you actually collect data for the outcomes of interest, and you compare the data for the actual observed data for the outcomes of interest to the simulation outputs, right? So let's say from the simulation you observe average waiting time for a patient. So let's say you have waiting time from the simulation that you compare with wait time from the the actual observed thing, right? So how do you actually do this? How do you what does comparing mean? So ideally, for example, you may want to do hypothesis tests, for example, right? So where you have a sample generated from the simulation of wait time. So let's say call it W1S, W2S, up to, for example, WNS. Here maybe you have observed you have a bunch of wait times. So you have W1O, W2O, and so on, WMO. There's no reason the simulation should produce uh, the same number of you know that you should have the same number of observations from your simulation versus what is observed, right? So that's not necessary. Um, then you conduct for example, like a two sample t test or whatever it is, right? So then you have parametric tests, your non-parametric tests, you don't need to worry about that. So ideally, yes, hypothesis tests. If not, you can actually look at calculating something like mean deviation, for example. Uh, so that, for example, is sigma. That will be your WIS minus WOS, I equals, this depends, right? So whether it's n or n, whichever is the smaller one, you know, let's I equals 1 to, let's say, minimum of nm. But ideally you want to do hypothesis tests. If not, then you set a standard saying, okay, you want this to be less than some alpha, right? So maybe it has to be less than 5% or whatever it is. And you can, of course, you can also you can divide this so you get the mean relative deviation as well. That is also possible, right? So it can be the mean deviation or the mean relative deviation, and so on. So that is so there are many ways to validate. What if you don't have this? What if you're not able to collect observed data for the outcomes of interest? Uh, what you have to do is you have to take your model, you have to actually present it to the stakeholders. You have to tell them, look, this is what is happening. This is what my model is. My simulation model is actually presenting, is generating. Do these outcomes look reasonable to you? Do they make sense to you? Right? Then they may say, okay, yes, no, this makes sense. This particular thing does not make sense. Maybe this particular logic is not right. So, by the way, at all steps, ideally, you should be sort of, for example, when you develop a conceptual model, you may want to go and talk to your domain experts, right? For example, in my case, I want to go and present it to the hospital. When I, for example, develop the logic here, the conceptual model, I may want to go and present it to the hospital manager, and I say, okay, look, here is the conceptual model I have. What do you think? Does this make sense? Does this not make sense? And they will tell us, okay, yeah, this part makes sense, this doesn't make sense, and so on, right? And then you make modifications, and then you arrive together, you arrive at a consensus on what is the best way, what is the best conceptual representation of your model, of your system. Similarly, when you estimate data as well, you ideally do that in collaboration, in consultation with your stakeholder, right? Same thing goes for example, validating the simulation model as well. So, regardless of whether you get observed data, whether you collect observed data for your outcomes of interest, you should still present your outcomes to the stakeholders and get their feedback. Okay, so that is very important. So you have to validate your model, and if you cannot validate your model, you have to sort of discuss it, and you have to, some form of validation is required. Okay, so that is important. In general, I want to say there have been cases where you have not been able to validate. So I'll give you an example. Uh, this paper that I showed you, initially we were not able to collect good data to model it. Now to validate it, we even now don't have very good data to validate it. So for example, I will show you. So here we have the simulation outcomes, right? So we are interested in wait time and so on, and we talk about validation here in detail. So for example, we say that we didn't have good data, so we actually went and presented it to our collaborator. So our collaborator at AIIMS, and they said, okay, our clinical collaborator informed us that the above simulation outcomes broadly represented admissions times observed in practice for each patient type. So you can see what I'm talking about, right? So here we did not have good data, but now we have obtained some little bit of data for validation, observed data for validation, and now we are comparing against that. So that is a good example here as well. So for example, if I talk about validation here, so here you can model validation and queuing analysis. So you can see that. So we say we measured the average waiting time spent in the outpatient queue before consulting the primary care doctor for 40 patients. Compare it to the estimates generated by our simulation model for configuration 1, the PHC closest in operation patterns to the primary care unit facility, right? And then we do some discussion around that. All right. You have to validate your model, and then of course you can observe. Okay, then you can you get your basic outcomes, your simulation outcomes. Again, let me just show you the an example here, right? So we talk about validation, we do a lot of validation here, and then we come here. So these are the, for example, the operational outcomes here, right? So yeah, so here we actually see, we show what is the utilization of the doctors, what is the utilization of the nurse, what is the mean number of patients in the queue. Here it's of course pretty low. what is the OPD, what is the waiting time in the OPD queue, what is the mean length of the lab queue, for example, what is the waiting time in the pharmacy queue, and so on. So we have various waiting times. So we observe the basic waiting times that are of interest, then we can talk about that. And then you can sort of discuss that, you can present that to your stakeholders, you can get their inputs and so on. After you do this, so first I would say what you want to do here is basically just collect key outcomes of interest. Okay, and then, but when you develop a simulation, you don't do it only just to generate these waiting times, right? What is the point of building a simulation for that? Because this is something that you can go and observe there at this is, you can figure out what your average waiting time is, you can get a rough estimate of the doctor's utilization, all of that just by sort of observing the system. Why do you need to go to the trouble of developing a simulation? You develop a simulation because if you have a validated simulation of some system, then you can make changes in that. You can sort of simulate the effect of making changes to that system without actually making them in practice. So let's say, for example, you have to change the configuration of the clinic in some way. If you actually have to implement it in practice, that might involve a lot of work, a lot of expenditure. Instead of, if you have a simulation, you can change it in the simulation, and then you can see what the effect is, and you can use it to inform your decision of whether to make those changes in actual practice or not. That is why people build simulations. That is why we built the simulation, for example, of the primary health care center, because it forms the basic unit of providing healthcare in this country, right? And there was no simulation model out there of PHCs in India. So we said, okay, you know what? Let's build a simulation model. Let's build simulation models. Let's visit PHCs. Let's figure out how they're operating. Let's build simulation models, and let's sort of put them out there so that, for example, other researchers or other hospital managers or other public health officials in other parts of the country can download and use our simulation models, to figure out whether any changes need to be made. They can adapt those simulation models for that particular facility and then use it to analyze them, right? So there are many different reasons why you may want to. So the idea is, the last step is really conduct simulation experiments. So these things that I said, where you come up with some change to the system in some way, and you want to test that change, and you want to know what effect it will have on your key outcomes of interest. So let's say I do something, for example, to I want to reduce waiting time. So let's say I make a change in configuration. I want to make a change in configuration, but I don't want to do it in practice, right? Because it's going to, before having a sense of how it will affect the waiting time. So what I do is I use my simulation, I simulate the change in the configuration of the clinic, I see how it affects waiting time, and then I incorporate it into the actual system. So the seventh step is conducting simulation experiments. Let me show you examples of that. So one outcome here, for example, that we did not like was, we saw that 15% of childbirth cases were being referred elsewhere because because they were, because they had to wait for a long time here. Okay, so for that, what we did was, we said, let us actually convert and so you can see that here. So these are all the scenario analyses. Let me show you. Wait. Configuration optimization, right? So this is what I'm talking about. So here we said, okay, one of the things that we're interested in is, how can we reduce the doctor's utilization when you have a large demand, right? So for that, we simulated a bunch of scenarios. So we said, okay, maybe the administrative work for the doctor can be taken over by the nurses, right? That sort of thing. We then said, okay, let us reduce the amount of time they spent on childbirth cases, because usually in a lot of cases the nurses are able to handle it quite well. So that is one example. So we said this led to a decrease of the doctor's utilization to 101%, and an increase in the nurses' utilization to 40%, right, and so on. And then we said, okay, what happens if you add another doctor? And then we said that yielded an average utilization of well below 100%, for example, right? So Then labor and inpatient bed utilization. For example, we said, okay, a significant fraction of patients are referred elsewhere. So for minimizing this, one of the inpatient beds was converted into an additional labor bed, and we show the results there. And we show that, okay, that shows a significant drop in the fraction of cases referred elsewhere. So you can see that, and so on, right? So this is an example. Another example I'll show you in the context of Monte Carlo simulation. Once again, I don't have that paper open, so I'll show you in the context of agent-based simulation, right? So here we do the validation. So this is the calibration part, actually the calibration of the model, and then we discuss the simulation experiments. So we are now able to estimate the impact of treatment with a treatment on population level outcomes. How does introducing a new treatment and having different uptake rates, what is its effect on the prevalence of a particular disease, right? So that is something that we simulated. Okay, so the point of developing the simulation always is actually is to conduct these sorts of experiments. Okay, and I'm showing you all of this through the context of my work, simply because of course I'm familiar with it. I can talk about it in detail, but there's plenty of examples of this in the literature. And the other reason I'm showing this to you is because what we're discussing in the context of simulation is not some exotic thing. Right, it's not some very complicated, very exotic thing. It's stuff that I'm doing right now with with BTech students, with master students, with PhD students, with your classmates, with your and so on. So it's nothing exotic. It's stuff that you can learn, you can do. Yeah, so and it's used very widely as well. Okay, yeah. All right, so we're going to end simulation here. So as I said, these are the steps. I just want to sort of recap them. So you study the system, you decide what to include in your simulation model. Then you develop a conceptual model of it, or a mathematical model in the case of Monte Carlo simulation. Then actually, let me just see if I have an example of the Monte Carlo simulation paper. Yeah, so I do. So this is an example of the Monte Carlo simulation paper where we develop this mathematical model here. For example, that starts from here. We develop the mathematical model. We all of this is a mathematical model part. There's a conceptual representation of it, and then once we have the model, we talk about the key outcomes. We talk about validation here briefly, and then what we do is we formulate a simulation optimization problem around it, an optimization problem around it. So this is your objective function here. This is the actual optimization problem formulation. Because it's a simulation optimization problem, I'm not writing out the objective function explicitly, but it basically comes from this. Okay, and subject to, you have some constraints here, and then we apply some procedures to solve it, and we get some results and so on. Okay, so this is again, this is a good example of a simulation optimization problem. Again, this is work done with a BTech student, by the way, who started working with me in his third year, I think. Yeah, or towards the end of his beginning of his third year. So yeah, so as I said, this is work that is published in 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 the premier sort of simulation in the simulation conference, for example, and we're working on journal versions of all of these. They're either under review or under preparation or already communicated, and so this is work that is happening here. This is stuff that you guys can do, you guys can learn, and eventually, for example, if you move into analytics and you move into operations research jobs, then simulation is a valuable tool to know. Okay, along with, of course, optimization, all the stuff that you learned in MCL 261. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a couple of more lectures tomorrow and day after also on dynamic programming. I want to finish off with that. For the quiz on Saturday, you won't have dynamic programming, but you will have this lecture up to and including this lecture. For the major exam, you will definitely have it up to this. I've not yet decided whether you're going to have dynamic programming. I'll let you know in the next day or two. Okay, it's just 2 lectures. It's just going to be a set of problems. It's just going to be maybe one problem or a couple of problems from dynamic programming in your lecture. in your major also. So it's not going to be too much, okay, even if we are going to have it. Finally, I want to say that before I move on to dynamic programming, that when we talk about manufacturing systems, the operations of manufacturing systems, um, there are a bunch of um, philosophies, management philosophies that are around. Okay, so things like lean manufacturing, things like Six Sigma, things like just in time, Kanban, Kaizen, and all that. So these are in some sense manufacturing philosophies that have been implemented by industries to manage their operations. Okay, so these are not mathematical models as such. So I have limited my discussion uh, of manufacturing system design in this course to essentially mathematical and computational models. Okay, now uh, if the original plan was to have Mr. Suresh Allen talk to you about these these management philosophies, but unfortunately, because of the lockdown, he's not very comfortable recording lectures at this point. What we are going to do is I'll give you some slides, okay, on these manufacturing philosophies. These are things that we are not going to have in as part of the syllabus for the exams. You don't have to read it before the majors. What we will do is I'll upload them, go through them. If you are, for example, in interviewing for core manufacturing jobs, it's not a bad idea to manufacturing operations jobs. It's not a bad idea to go through them, actually get a rough sense of lean manufacturing, just in time, Kanban, Kaizen. It's also there in the factory physics book, by the way. If you read that, that's more than enough, okay. I'll point out the specific chapters to read in the book, in the factory physics book. I'll also upload some slides that he would have given you had he sort of taken the last module of the class. uh, that combined with the mathematical techniques that I have, mathematical and the computational techniques like simulation that we have discussed in the course, should actually prepare you very well uh, from the perspective of managing manufacturing, or for that matter service operations. Okay, so I'm going to stop this lecture here. I'll upload a couple of more lectures on dynamic programming over the next couple of days, and as I said, that's not going to be there in the quiz on Saturday, but it may or may not. I'll make a decision whether to include it for the syllabus in your major exam over the next day or two, maybe mostly by tomorrow night. Okay,